A week ago, last Tuesday, I heard a knock on my door. 1:30 in the morning, no less. Yeah, I shouted as the knocking continued. Hold on a minute, will ya? I'm not answering my door in my boxers. So, I pulled on some jeans I found on the floor and took a cigarette out of the carton next to my bed. I came to the door expecting it to be my best friend, turning up drunk as he has done a few times, wanting a place to crash. But instead, it was a small blonde. I didn't get a good look at her face as she pushed right past me into my door. As she walked towards my living room, she said in a muttered, teary tone, Please close the door, Anon. He might have been following me. I thought about it for a minute and closed the door. Whatever her problem, it was going to be a long fucking night. I hesitated before entering my front room. I hadn't been awake 5 minutes, and this was a lot to take in all at once. But since this thing was already been set in motion, I let out a sigh, peeled the cigarette from my lip, and licked my lips before putting it back in. I lit it and entered my front room. The blonde girl was facing the door as I walked in, and I raised an eyebrow upon realizing who it was. Been a long time. 7 years, in fact. Never thought I'd see you again. She hesitated before speaking, her eyes darting around, seemingly looking for some words as I stood, leaning on the doorframe, staring at her. She clasped her hands together and looked down and muttered something to herself before looking up at me and saying, Sorry to barge in, Daniel, but I had nowhere else to go. Can I stay here tonight, please? I smiled, taking the cigarette from my mouth and saying, Well, this is nice. Not a word in over 7 years, and now you come here asking for a free room. I have a pretty good memory, and last time we talked, I believe it was you who threw me out. Why shouldn't I do the same thing to you? She looked up at me through her fingers, and choking back tears, she uttered, Please, I don't have anywhere else. Please let me stay. Feeling a hint of remorse, I sighed and sat down on the couch opposite, taking the ashtray into my hands and sitting back. From the beginning, why are you here? I'll let you stay for a night if it's good enough. If it's a falling out with your boyfriend or whatever, you can leave now. I'm not interested in getting caught up in your new lover quarrels. She said nothing for a moment and just sat, sobbing. Part of me felt bad for her, but that part was small compared to the seething hatred I bore for this woman. I flicked some ash into the ashtray on the coffee table and waited. Then she began to speak. Look, I know it's been a long time, Daniel, and I'm really sorry for coming here. I know you wouldn't have wanted to see me again after what happened, but I know you're a good person, and this was the last place I could turn to. You're the only one who could help me now. Tears began streaming from her eyes as she began to sob again as her body shook. I tried to keep myself calm and treat her with the contempt she deserved for her past deeds, but my compassionate side got the better of me, and I stood up and walked out the room, returning with 2 glasses, a bottle of wine, and the carton of cigarettes from my room. I poured myself a glass and placed it on my side of the coffee table before settling the bottle down next to her, followed by the glass. I took my lighter from my pocket and flicked it over to her side of the table. She took her hands away from her face and looked up at me. I know you don't smoke anymore, but I'm not going to get anything out of you while you're sitting there mumbling into your hands. Pour yourself a glass too. It'll ease you up a little. She poured herself a glass of wine and took a cigarette from the carton before looking up at me. I looked back at her and waited. She took out a cigarette, lit it, and took a long drag before coughing violently. Fuck me, I lamented as I leaned over and took the cigarette from her fingers. Forget the cigarettes, just have a drink. It'll stop your throat burning. She polished off the glass quickly and caught her breath. Still tensed up, she looked towards me before apologizing and looking down at her feet. I was about to tell her to get on with it before she started speaking again. He beats me, she said, the words rushing out of her mouth as she shook. Tonight, he came home drunk and ripped my pajama top off. When I woke up and struggled, he put his hands around my neck. I bit his arm to make him let go, and he caught my hair when I tried to run away. She started sobbing hard again, tears rolling from the cracks between her fingers. I was taken back by this for a moment, before swallowing and rubbing my head with my free hand. Swallowing my emotions, I muttered, "So, have you called the police? Why didn't you go back to your mom's house? Why here?" She poured herself a tall glass of wine and washed it down again, slamming the glass on the coffee table haphazardly, her hands shaking. "Because nobody wants to hear it. I've told the police and they couldn't do anything. I tried, but I was too scared of what he would do to me. I looked on the internet and only a small amount of assault charges from domestics are ever convicted. If he got out, he would kill me. And my mom? You remember my mom, Daniel. She couldn't care less about me. I've tried telling her, but she says I'm being ridiculous. I can't tell my friends because they all like them and it would get back to him. You're the only person I know who has nothing to do with any of it." "So what?" I said as I leaned back on the sofa. "Call me because I'm the only one you can hide behind?" "No, that's not it." "Then what do you want me to do? For all I know, this is a pack of lies. Why should I help you? In fact, why should I even trust you after what you did?" Her eyes widened as she started shaking again, sobbing loudly. I felt bad, but that feeling was stifled by the words I'd just said. She tore me a new one 7 years back. I don't owe her anything. If anything, she owes me. Why should I give a shit what happens to her? "Well," I said, the aggressive tone in my words as present as before, "did you think that I'd welcome you here? Do you even remember what you did, all the pain you caused?" All my words did was make her sob louder. I checked myself and took a deep breath, holding it in for a moment and letting it out slowly. Getting angry isn't going to do this situation any good. Even so, I'm not apologizing. I should be allowed to be eternally pissed at her for what she did, but this wasn't the time or the place for that. I always imagined the score between us would be settled on top of a mountain with katanas and yellow jumpsuits. Why not, after all? In my mind, it stood just as much chance of happening as any other chance to settle the score between us. In other words, never. But here she was, at her weakest I'd ever seen her, sobbing into her hands. My mind could have followed that train of thought forever, but she stood up and began to unbutton her coat. That moment of silence must have given her a chance to think. She set down her coat over the back of the sofa and revealed a stripy pair of pajamas. She began unbuttoning that too, as she turned her back to me. As the top fell to her arms, I saw all I needed to see. Deep blue bruises, cuts, scratches, and a particularly bad bruise down her lower left back, as if she had been hit by a chair or a bar. She had her eyes closed as she turned to face me. Her stomach was even worse than her back. There were big patches of blue and yellow all around where the old ones had begun to heal, cuts around her navel, particularly bad bruising around the collarbone. She was telling the truth. By the looks of it, it had all been going on for months. "He never hits anywhere anyone can see," she muttered, looking down at her feet. "I can show you my legs too. They're much worse than—" And she began to cry again. I felt like an asshole, sitting there witnessing that after all the mouth that I had just gave her. I buried my face in my hands, the ash dropping onto the sofa as I rubbed up and down, trying to find some words. "Wait there," I said, getting off the sofa and walking towards the door. I walked into my bedroom and pounded my fist on my bed as I sat down for a moment. What do I do? I thought to myself. Like, I can be angry at her now. Look at the fucking state she's in. I gave myself a moment, gritting my teeth at the fact that even with all the anger and hostility I hold for her, I could never bring myself to do even 1% of what that guy has done to her. She looks fucking awful, and it's quite obvious she's been through hell. If I did anything now, it's tantamount to kicking a man, or woman, while she's down. That isn't my style. As much of an asshole I'd like to believe I am, I draw the line at beating the living shit out of a 100-pound, 5'2" woman, realizing that even if she did fight back, We're talking about a girl who couldn't tenderize a steak, much less hold her own against a grown fucking man. Just made my blood boil. After a while, I decided I'd have to swallow my hatred until this matter was resolved. And with that, I went through my drawers, picking out a ratty old band t-shirt and some green jogging bottoms, a towel and a pair of boxers, just in case. After being gone for around 15 minutes, I returned to the living room and she turned to face me, her cheeks sore from the tears. I dumped the pile of clothes and the towel next to her and said, "Shower and change. It'll make you feel better. I'll sort you out some bedding." She silently took the pile into her arms and headed to the bathroom, saying thanks as she passed. I go to work finding my sleeping bag that I could unzip and give to her to use as a blanket. When she emerged from the bathroom, she had changed into my spare clothes. I leaned out of the kitchen and down the hall and muttered, "My bedroom. Hair dryer, fourth drawer on the left. It's already plugged in, just flick it on." She nodded and made her way into my bedroom with her hair in a towel. In the kitchen, I had made some hot chocolate, not strictly for her benefit as I fancied it, but I made enough for two and set one down on the coffee table. I'd pushed towards the wall in the living room so I could join the two sofas together to make a makeshift bed. As she came into the room with her hair freshly blow-dried, I turned the timer lamp on, along with the hi-fi system, and pointed towards the hot mug of cocoa. "Don't worry about the lamp. From what I remember, you didn't like the dark too much. It'll go off eventually by itself. Sorry about the pillows. They're a little old, but they're the only spare set I have. It's all clean, though." "Thank you," she said quietly, as I put my hand on the light switch. I turned to the door and flicked the lights off. "Drink up and try to get some sleep. You'll be all right." "Good night," she said quietly, sitting down on her makeshift bed, taking the cocoa into her hands. "Night," I said, as I closed the door and made my way into my bedroom. I lay on my bed awake for what felt like hours, the events of the night clashing against the past in my mind, not knowing how to feel about all of this. One side of me wanted to march in there and throw her out to the streets, remembering what she did to me. She would have more than deserved it. The other side of me telling me to be the bigger man and give her a break until this thing was over. I closed my eyes and tried to calm myself. After all, whether I liked it or not, nothing was going to get resolved that night. Whatever I tried, I couldn't sleep. I've never been one for sleeping in the covers, so I tossed and turned on top of them every so often, hunting for the cool spots, trying to get back to sleep. Eventually, I heard something. It was quiet. I listened intently, and it sounded like whispering. I tried to ignore it, but I couldn't, and with a mumbled, "Fuck me," I got up and went for a piss, before stopping in my tracks in the hallway to see if she was still at it. She was. So I took a deep breath and opened the door. It was pitch black inside. The lamp had gone off. I whispered, "Still awake?" And I heard a muffled, "Mm-hmm," as she sniffled. I turned the dimmer light down before hitting the light switch as to not blind her with the light, and there she was under the blankets. As I walked towards her, she sat up to reveal damp patches on the pillow where the tears had sunk through, telling me that she had been at it for a while. I took my cigarettes off of the coffee table and asked her if she wanted a cup of tea, and she nodded. I walked out of the room and put the kettle on before walking through my bedroom and onto the balcony. With a lit cigarette, I sat down cross-legged, staring through the bars at the cityscape. It was obvious I wasn't going to get any sleep now. I'd probably have to call in sick to work as well, while I sorted out this blast from the past shit heap that had been shoved onto my plate. As much anger as I was feeling over the whole thing, I couldn't ignore that little voice in my head telling me to have some compassion. I sat there as the cold January winds whistled around my body, wondering what the fuck I should do next. Sitting there like that usually gave me a few answers, but tonight it was turning up nothing. And who could blame it? This isn't exactly a typical Tuesday night problem, I thought to myself. I guess getting her to sleep is first on the list. If she sits and cries like that, then I won't get back to sleep anyway. As the cigarette burned down to the filter, I stood up and spat it out over the balcony railing and headed back inside to the warmth of my bedroom, then through the kitchen as I made a pot of tea. Then, with that, With 2 mugs, a little bottle of milk, and the sugar pot, I made my way into the living room. She was still sitting up with that sad expression on her face as I set the tray down on the coffee table. "Take it the way you did before?" I said, pouring the tea into the mug. "Yeah," she said. "2 sugars, 1 drop of milk," I thought to myself as I made her tea and handed it to her. I made mine and climbed onto the sofa bed before sitting down, cross-legged at the far side where her feet were. We sat in silence while we sipped away, searching for words. Finally, she broke the silence with, "I don't know what I'm gonna do, Daniel. By now, he's noticed I'm gone, and he's probably gone ballistic. He's probably looking for me." I set my mug down in the palm of my hand in my lap. "Does he know about this place?" I asked, looking at her. "No. I never told him about you." I thought for a second before asking a question I should have asked right at the start. "Who told you my address anyways? I don't remember giving you my contact details." She looked up at me and said, "Promise not to get mad?" "No, but I'd still like to know. Don't tell me you 192'd my ass." She grimaced as she rubbed the side of her mug. "I've known for a while. I found it online." I raised my eyebrows in that, thought so kind of way. "As long as you didn't ask my parents or friends or anything, I'd have been pissed if they were so fast to give my address to you, of all people." She looked down at the mug and stayed completely silent for a moment. Then, not looking towards me at all, I saw a tear drop into her tea. "You never did forget what I did you?" As she said those words, I had to suppress my inner demon from getting out and blowing up. I've suppressed my rage towards her for so many years. It's hard to keep it bottled when the person who wreaked so much havoc and caused so much pain in your life is right there in front of you. It took me a moment to compose myself and make sure I wouldn't explode at her. "No," I said, my deep tone just barely hiding my anger. "I couldn't." She stayed silent. When she breathed in, I could hear the staggered pattern of her inhaling. She was obviously still suppressing her urge to cry. As she breathed out, she took the mug to her lips and finished the tea, then leaned over the arm of the sofa and set it down on the floor. Then she looked to me and said, "Please, listen to me. I need you to promise you won't blow up, Daniel. Please promise you'll try to listen." Again, I had to give myself a moment to make sure I could keep my feelings in check. When I was confident I could, I nodded and said, "Okay, but if I tell you to stop, you stop. Got it?" She nodded as she fiddled with her fingers, trying to organize her thoughts, probably in a fashion that wouldn't tip me over the edge and cause me to explode into a fit of rage as she spoke. Then, looking up a few times to check if I was ready to receive it, she began. You probably don't want an apology after all this time, but I want to apologize. I've wanted to for a long, long time. I took so much from you back then, and I can see the pain I caused is still there now. I tried so hard to say sorry, but I was scared. I heard through people how angry you were. I heard that you were in the hospital because of how I made you feel. I was terrified of ever seeing you again." I gritted my teeth as I looked down into my mug, half concentrating on the low music coming from the hi-fi, trying to use it to take my mind off of the memories that were rushing into my head with every word spoken. If I wasn't backed into a corner as much as I am now, I doubt I'd ever been in a position to explain myself as I am now. And even now I'm scared any moment you're going to... She let out a sigh as a tear rolled down her cheek. She continued with a fearful tone. "I manipulated you. I knew you loved me, and I used your feelings against you. I stole from you. I hid things from you. I went behind your back. She took a deep breath, choking on her tears. By now, my brow was ruffled, and I couldn't stop my face from showing my anger. I did my best to hear her out, even as my teeth were clenched together and my mind blanked. My eyes lost focus as feelings of rage swept up and down my body. I stopped myself from moving or speaking, intently listening to her every word. "I lied and stole from your family. I made you take stupid risks for my sake, and I used you, Daniel. I'm a fucking terrible person." With that, she burst into a full-fledged, loud sobbing. I sat there, taking it all in, trying my very best not to react, waiting for her to finish. Every single word was like her twisting the knife in my old wounds. The very fact that she knew what she was doing only amplified my rage to a level I'd never felt before. Never had I wanted to let go and take out my anger on anyone so much. The only thing stopping me was the fact that if I did, I probably wouldn't be able to stop and I'd lose everything I'd built in the last 7 years for one flash moment of revenge. Instead, I sat, seething in anger as she sobbed, waiting for her to speak. After her emotional outburst, she composed herself enough and continued. I'm so sorry for what I did to you. I had absolutely no reason to do the things I did. I knew you loved me so much, and I know you hate me now. I deserve to be hated. I still can't believe you haven't thrown me out of your home yet. I know this isn't enough to make up for what I did, not even a little bit, but I'm sorry, Daniel. If you'll let me, I'll try to make it up to you, even if it takes me years. I don't expect you to forgive me for what I did. I sat there, brooding. She caught a glimpse of my expression and shuffled backwards a little as I lifted my head. Tears around my cheeks, my teeth clenched, eyes fixed on her like a beast, and my hands pressing so tightly clenched around my mug, it felt like I could shatter it. I felt the growl as I spoke. You don't even know the half of it, do you? What I've had to do because of you, what I've been through. Thanks to you, I haven't trusted anyone in years. Because of what you did to me, I've not even been able to so much as think about it without feeling sick to my stomach. Take your half-assed apology and shove it up your ass. You're right. I don't want it. Until tonight, I'd have been happy with never seeing your face again, but here you are. You want to do me a favor? I took a cigarette from my pocket and lit it, and stared at her. Shut up, and never say you're sorry again. Don't even speak about it. We sat in silence for a while. I listened to the radio as I let my feelings settle. The near silence lasted for ages as she sat staring down at her lap. Eventually she said, Can I ask, why don't you say my name? The anger flashed inside my chest again as I thought about her question. Because it hurts to be even reminded of you. That's why. I cringe every time I hear it, even on the news or in a song. Oh, she said, another string of tears running down her cheek. Should I go? I thought about it for a second as I flopped my head over to the back of the sofa. No. As much as I hate you, you're not leaving. And if you really want to start making it up to me, you'll stay put. I can't stand the thought of throwing you out because that would make me as bad as you were. I smiled, and I let a puff of smoke out of my mouth, still staring at the dim lights on the ceiling. There's plenty of time for the score to be settled between us, I thought to myself. Maybe all of this will help me get over the past. But again, nothing is going to get resolved tonight. I sat up on the chair again and looked at her. Do you have a job? She nodded. Are you working tomorrow? She shook her head. No, not until Monday. I see. Well, do you have any plans tomorrow? She hesitated before opening her mouth. No. I was planning on figuring out what I'm going to do. I can't go back there. And he'll have already told my mom I ran away. If he catches me, she muttered under her breath. He won't, I said, staring at her. Tomorrow we're going to get your stuff. Is he a big man? She shook her head. No, just stronger than me. Good. If I'm doing this, I'll be damned if I'm going to get the shit kicked out of me. She looked at me wide-eyed and fiddled with the blanket. Yeah, but in return, you're going to make good on what you said. Starting tomorrow, you're paying me back for every little thing you stole from me. Throwing you out means throwing out the opportunity to make you pay for what you did. So that's only fair. She looked up at me and nodded, biting her lip to keep herself from smiling. You're apologizing to my family too, and paying them back, but we'll take this one step at a time. She hesitated before nodding slowly. 4,462 pounds. And that only covers what you stole financially. I thought to myself, I'm going to make it impossible for you to screw me over again. You better be ready." I looked at her and said, "Think you can go to sleep now? Because the sun's gonna rise soon." She nodded, and I picked myself up and jumped off the sofa and onto the floor. As I went to walk past her and out of the room, she grabbed my hand and looked up at me, and then said thank you. I took my hand away and paused, and said, "Get some sleep. You're gonna have a long day tomorrow." I went to bed and went out like a light, and woke up the next day around noon. As I tiptoed into my living room, I saw her sprawled out over the sofas, hugging the sleeping bag, like a sad Japanese man hugging a body pillow. That's nostalgic, I thought to myself. Closing the door again and heading into the shower, I pressed my hands against the tiles as the water poured over me, thinking about what happened last night. Today was going to be a long day, and over half of the daylight had already been spent sleeping. I winced at the thought of not calling in sick for work in time and mentally prepared for my boss to chew my ass off. But telling him I was up all night wouldn't exactly be a lie, even if the rest of it would be. Jumping out of the shower, I brushed my teeth and took a new toothbrush out of the bathroom drawer. If I was a petty man, I'd make her pay for that too, I thought to myself before shaking it off and wrapping a towel around myself. Well, I hope I still have those body pads somewhere. If tonight goes how I think it will, I'd like to come away with as few bruises as possible. Then again, any man who knocks around women probably won't have the balls to take on a man my size. But still. As I was getting dressed, I found them. Body pads I used in contact sports for practice at some gyms back when I was a gym rat. I went for a few classes. Didn't learn anything and stuck to the irons instead. I felt a little remorseful over my giving up so soon. If tonight goes how I think it will, those skills probably would have come in handy. Still, no point in complaining about that now. I put them on and felt a little silly about it. So I put on some baggy cargos and a black tank top under my t-shirt, then put a shirt over that left open. I got the urge to take them off as I felt like a wuss, but managed to convince myself to keep them on, even if it just prevented him from knocking the wind out of me or taking me down by booting the back of my leg. The extra little bit of resistance would probably be worth it. I slipped my trainers on, dried my hair with the hairdryer, and went into the kitchen to make some coffee. As I did so, a small figure appeared from the living room door, peering around the kitchen threshold. "Morning," I said without turning around. "Go and grab a shower. I've left a towel and some more clothes for you in there. We'll worry about getting yours back later." She shuffled into the bathroom as I went into the living room and put the sofas back and folded up her bedding. Then I sat and thought about how we'd go about getting her things. I had cardboard boxes in the back of my wardrobe and a collapsible carry crate under my bed. More than enough to put her clothes and things in. I can't imagine her wanting much more than clothes, documents, and other essentials. When she came in, I asked her what she wanted to get out of there. As she sat down, she quietly said, Not a lot. You could probably fit it all into a box." "Would it fit in the back of my car?" She looked taken back for a second, then went on to say, "You drive?" "Yeah, the blue one. It's right outside the flats. Think it'll fit?" She nodded as she sat and sipped, and then for the next few hours we talked about how it would go down. She was confident that with me there he wouldn't try anything, and she knew exactly what she wanted to take. All she would need to do is go up to the bedroom and into the kitchen to get her things, so keeping him in the living room would be the best way to deal with it all. Around 5 p.m., we were ready to go and we got in the car. As we approached the place, she shook nervously, her eyes fixed out of the car window watching the street lights. As the sat-nav told me to turn on her street, she began fidgeting and breathing heavily, and just for a moment, she looked at me with desperation in her eyes, like she just wanted to get the fuck out of there. But I was determined to start sorting out this mess, and I was determined not to let her go back on her word or go back to his place. Just picturing the bruises all over her made me want to smash his face in. I used that feeling as my resolve as we pulled up outside of the place. And what a fucking dump it was. Quiet as the street appeared to be, there was that lingering feeling of being in a shitty neighborhood, which I'd thought I'd left behind when I moved out of the flat we shared 7 years ago. It was a daunting feeling, to say the least, but popping a cigarette out of the carton in the center console and taking my shirt off to prevent it working against me in the struggle, I opened the car door and lit my cigarette. "No!" she screamed as I went to get out of the car. "Please, can't we just go back to yours? I'll get new clothes and everything. I don't need any of it." Shifting myself into my battle mode mindset, I looked at her and said, "We're doing this. Get out of the car." And with that, I grabbed the boxes from the boot and stared into the passenger side window from the pavement, waiting for her to get out. When we did, I asked her which door she was, and she nervously and quietly said, 3B. As soon as she said it, I took a deep breath, flicked my cigarette, and began walking towards the door. As we entered the building, she stayed very close to my back, and as we walked up the stairs, I could hear her forcing every step as if she was carrying a 2-ton car on her shoulders. As I approached the door, she clung to my back, and I could feel her shaking, which only added to my resolve to get this done and go home. As I knocked, I heard a whimper, and she jerked violently at every little sound, as if she was expecting to get hit as soon as he opened the door. As the door opened, a 5'7" fat man who looked rough as fuck stared right back at me. Then he looked around me to see her shaking behind me. "What's this about?" he said. I could feel that "oh shit" feeling in his words as he looked me up and down, trying to act tough. I stared at him for a moment, then said, "I think you know what this is about, mate. Step aside and let her get her things and there won't be any trouble." He took a step back into the flat and grabbed the door. He tried to slam it in my face, but I jammed my foot in the threshold and used my arm to stop him from closing and locking the door. "Fuck off, or I'm calling the police." Struggling against his weight, I managed to shift my arm onto the side of the door. Then I shoved myself against it with all my weight, forcing him backwards and the door wide open. I wasted no time in marching up to him and shoving him into the front room. Then I called back, "Now, get in and get your things. He's not going anywhere." He tried to shove me out of the way, out of the door, but despite his weight, his flabby, weak arms prevented him from making me budge. He gritted his teeth at me and made a fist. As it came towards me, I knocked his arm to one side, grabbed him by his shoulders, and shoved him as hard as I could, sending him stumbling backwards onto the sofa behind him. "Sit down, you fat cunt," I yelled. "You're lucky I don't cave in your fucking face, mate. You think I haven't seen what you've done to her? Give me a fucking excuse, you lump of shit. I dare you." He picked himself up off the sofa and came careering towards me again. I shifted myself forwards to catch him, but the sheer weight of him forced me up against the door, and he tried wrapping himself around me and using his weight to shift me sideways. Completely enraged, I grabbed him by the back of his head and drew my head back before landing the biggest Glasgow kiss in the history of Glasgow kisses. So impressive that even Billy Connolly would blush at the sight of it. And with that, he staggered backwards, holding his nose, which soon began to pour blood. He went to get up off the sofa again, but this time I lunged forwards. "Try it. I fucking dare you." He hesitated and faltered, putting a hold on his nose. To my amazement, he started to cry, which was a fucking ugly sight. I jeered at him. "Fat cunt," I muttered under my breath, leaning with my back against the door. "Look at you. Fucking pathetic. Not so easy when you're dealing with a man and not a weak, terrified girl, is it, mate?" He went to get up again, and again I lunged forward, ready to counter him. He sat back on the chair and muttered, "I'm calling the police when you leave. You're gonna get done." I smiled and leered at him. "Yeah, and so will you. I doubt she'll hesitate to prosecute you this time, knowing that if you touch her again, I'll be there." He muttered again, "Not if you're in the nick. You can't protect her forever." This sent my blood boiling, and I marched over to him, grabbing his shoulders and forcing his back to the sofa. Getting right in his face and looking into his eyes, his arms flailed as my face grew closer. His fingers left prints of his noseblood on his arms and a bit on my face. My teeth were in full display. Unable to compose myself, I seethed at him. "You so much as text that girl again, and I'll be back. I don't care if I go to prison. I will fucking bury you." I shoved my arms to push myself away from the sofa and took my place standing against the door again, staring at him until finally she said, I've got everything. Can we go? Yeah, I said as I turned to the door. Head down to the car and get in. I'll be down in a minute. If there's more than one box, leave it by the door and I'll carry it down. I heard her shuffle out of the flat, and I stood and stared at him, counting in my head, watching for any movement other than staggered breathing and him wiping the blood off of his face. When 60 seconds were up in my head, I took a deep breath and turned towards the door. As I opened it, he went to get up, and I spun around on the attack. Stay down! I shouted. He hesitated and sat back down, his face twisted at me. I know you're not stupid enough to follow me out, mate. Stay there and wait until the front door closes. I watched him for a moment, making sure he understood. Then I walked out the door, picking up a box just outside of the entrance to the flat filled with clothes, shoes, books, and an assortment of CDs and DVDs. As I started down the stairwell, I heard the door slam loudly. I stopped and looked up, making sure he wasn't stupid enough to follow me out and try and get the drop on me on the stairs. Then I continued down to the car. I put the box in the boot, made my way around to the driver's side before jumping in and starting the car, opening the window, and lighting a cigarette. I looked over at her and she was wide-eyed, looking back. Blood, she whimpered, staring at my shirt, then my face. Yeah, I said. Then I took the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to say, don't worry, it's not mine. I smiled as I thought back on that part in Die Hard. Pretty sure it was Die Hard 3. Then I shifted the car into gear and began to drive off. She was as quiet as a mouse all the way back. We got out and carried the boxes up to my flat. His flat was the other side of the city, so it took a while to get back. It was so quiet in the car on the way back, I hardly noticed that she had been crying, but her cheeks were red and puffy, which was a clear indication. The silence continued as we went in and set the boxes down in the living room. There, I said. That's the hard part over. Now we just need to sort your life out. She stood, staring at me as tears began trickling down her face again. Then, she started stumbling towards me. As she welled up and she fell onto my chest, she began bawling loudly, wrapping her arms tightly around my waist. I stood in complete silence. I went to put my hands on her shoulders or embrace her, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. After all, I couldn't even stand saying her name, never mind comforting her. But I wasn't pushing her away either, so I wasn't completely heartless. She stood, sobbing into my chest for what felt like ages. I guess she sees this is the end of her nightmare. Natural for her to get it all out, I thought to myself. She looked up at me. I snorted, stared back at her, and then said, You hungry? I don't know about you, but a shower and some food sound pretty good right about now. I don't think I can answer my door to the courier man with the blood on me after all. She smiled and loosened her grip. Blood on your forehead, I said, pointing to it. You probably want to wipe that off. There's a small chance he might be retarded enough to call the police. You don't want to look like an accomplice to an assault. And dry off your eyes as well. She looked up at me and smiled weakly, before turning and walking into the bathroom. I followed and turned towards my bedroom to pick out some shorts and a clean t-shirt, then called the curry house while she cleaned herself up in the bathroom. I undressed in my bedroom, taking my t-shirt off, then my tank top, and finally the pads. I laughed to myself. Some good those fucking things were. What the hell was I thinking? I took them off and whimsically skimmed them under my bed, then took my shoes and cargos off and did the same for the thigh and shin pads. You out the bathroom yet? I called out. I heard a yeah from the living room as I walked into the bathroom. I said, If the courier man comes while I'm in here, my wallet is on the desk in my bedroom. It should come to around 20 quid. Okay. I jumped in the shower, making sure to scrub my face well enough to get the pig blood off of me. The courier man came while I was in there, and I heard her pay and take the bag into the kitchen. When I came out, she had already prepared the meal and was sitting down in the living room with the plates on the coffee table waiting for me. I still need to dry my hair, I said as I peered into the room. It's fine. You can start without me. When my hair was dry, I took a seat, leaned forward, and started eating. Once the meal was over, I took the plates into the kitchen and washed them up in the sink. I took 2 ice-cold beers to the living room, opened one, and placed it in her hands before flopping down onto the sofa. Silence filled the room as we watched the news on TV. I smiled to myself, fantasizing about me appearing on there. Super badass crushes fat guy's nose. End string of domestic abuse. Police now charging him with assault and battery. More of this at 10. I looked over at her. She seemed to be deep in thought for a while before catching me staring. I huffed, gave a smirk, and said, "It's getting late. Go ahead and take a shower. At least now you can wear your own pajamas, right?" She smiled before getting up to go for her shower. Taking the opportunity that had presented itself, I stretched out on the sofa, letting my legs dangle from side to side. Normally, I'd sit on the sofa opposite the small coffee table, but she had forced me to sit next to her. I finished my beer and closed my eyes, relaxing after a job well done, and let out a big, loud roar as I yawned. I heard the water starting to run in the shower, and then I drifted off for a while. When I came to, she was sitting on the sofa opposite, watching TV in a pair of soft, pink, formal-style pajamas. Classy, I thought to myself before sitting up and rubbing my eyes. "How long was I sleeping?" I said. She looked over at me and said, "Not long. About half an hour." "Shit," I said, standing up to stretch out. "I can never get to sleep after a nap." I picked up the coffee table and placed it down before sliding it against the wall. "Come on, it won't do either of us any good if we keep staying up. It'll just fuck up our sleeping patterns." With that, she stood up and walked behind the sofa, and together we pushed them into the same bed formation they were before. I took the sleeping bag and folded it out over the sofas and threw the pillows to the armrests, then walked over to the lamp, set the timer, and turned it on. "Do you want the radio on low like last night?" I asked. She nodded. "Kerrang, Galaxy, BBC One?" "Kerrang, please," she said quietly, sitting down on her bed. "My iPod has some albums on it too. If you still have the same shitty taste in music as me, just put it on shuffle and press the aux button on top." "Okay," she said as she nodded. I dimmed the lights right down again as I went to walk out of the room. As I grabbed the door handle, she jumped off her bedding and made her way over to me. Without warning, she wrapped her arms around me again and pressed her face hard into my chest. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I promise I'll make up for everything I did to you, Daniel." With that, she squeezed and then let go, standing back. "Night," I said, as I began to step backwards towards the door. "Good night," she said back, and with that I closed the door, went into my bedroom, and flopped down onto my bed face first. Admittedly, I found myself in a bit of a worry over what I'd done and whether he was stupid enough to try and press charges. It's our word against his. He says aggravated assault, I'll say self-defense and defending a friend who lived there. His side won't stand up in court, not after they see her bruises. If he can think that far, he wouldn't dare. They'd eat a fatty like that alive in prison. I reassured myself with these thoughts, but still unable to sleep. I decided to tiptoe into the kitchen and took a bottle of Malibu out of the cupboard. Then I went back into my bedroom and onto the balcony, broke the seal on the bottom, and had a good long swig before lighting up a cigarette and leaning against the wall with my feet sticking through the railings. I sat there for ages, trying to clear my head, staring out at the cityscape like the night before that. I took it easy, but kept sipping the Malibu, hoping to get drunk enough to eventually get to bed. Before long, I found myself staring out, admiring the lights of the city center, when I heard the door creak open with a small figure peering out. "Can't sleep either, can you?" "No," she said before taking a seat next to me. I picked up the bottle and offered it to her. She read the label slowly before taking a swig, then coughing as her body tried to reject the strong taste of rum among the coconut. I smiled and said, "If you don't drink it straight, you're supposed to tell me. It's barely 20% proof. I'm guessing you're still not much of a drinker?" She composed herself before leaning on me. Then she took another swig, this time calmly, without gagging, and then let out a loud sigh. "I don't know what I'm gonna do." "Well, if it's anything like getting kicked out, you're supposed to find a new address, tell your bank, place of work, DVLA and the passport office your new address, cancel any subscriptions you have at your old address. You get the idea. She looked towards me and gave a wry smile before looking out again. How did you find this place? I took a swig before saying, forget it. For starters, you're not going anywhere until you pay me back, and that's probably going to take a few months. You can pay me back faster if we split the rent and bills between us. Not thinking about going back on our deal, are you? No, she said with a serious tone. But thanks. That'll make it easier. Do you mean I can live with you for a while? I thought about this carefully and took my time to gather the correct words. Now, let's not forget that I still hate her. I don't want her thinking that we were pals just because she came to me in an hour of need. After a while, I said, until you've paid me back. I don't want you going anywhere, so yeah, you can register here for now. We'll do the paperwork tenancy after I get back from work tomorrow. You can spend tomorrow sorting out your accounts and changing your addresses. Deal? Deal, she said, staring out into the night sky. After a while, I stood up and gestured for her to come on in. I set the bottle and cigarettes down on my desk and stretched out on my bed. She sat down on the corner facing the door. It looked like she was trying to say something, so I closed my eyes and waited, but nothing came of it. She stood up. With my eyes still shut, I felt a tap on my forehead, and she said goodnight and walked out of the door. I brought my fingers up and felt where she tapped. It was a little damp. Finger kiss, I thought to myself. If I'd saw it coming, I'd have dodged it. Refusing to think about it any further, I went to sleep. The next day I got up, showered, dressed, and left for work without waking her up. I only left a note on the fridge that read, change your addresses, help yourself to whatever you can find. I'll be going shopping before coming home tonight. Be back around 7 to 8. And remember your promise. At work, it was a pretty shitty day. Like I imagined. My boss chewed the shit out of me in the morning briefing, and I had to work twice as hard to catch up on my tasks. I was knackered by the time 5 p.m. hit. I made my way to Lidl and did the shopping, then came back to the flat. When I came in, she was sitting in the living room, paperwork out all over the coffee table, with her netbook on her lap and her glasses on. How did it go? I said, walking into the kitchen to unpack. I hope you don't mind, Daniel. I had to use your printer to print out a new passport application and some other stuff. Nah, had to be done, I guess, I said whimsically. What do you want to eat? I called out. I heard nothing for a moment. Then, I have a discount code for Papa John's Pizza in my email. My treat tonight. Alright. Sounds good. I called back, grabbing 2 beers from the fridge and setting one her aside on the coffee table before lying down on the sofa on the opposite side, swigging the bottle of beer in my hand. Well, I called my landlord for the forms. He's dropping them off on Tuesday next week. He said it's fine to split the rent I'm paying now, but needs you on the tenancy agreement for his insurance. She looked over at me and smiled before facing back down to her laptop. You still look weird in glasses, you know. Reminds me of how you looked in school. She simply nodded before saying, you want a hot pizza? No mushrooms? Sounds good. See? I remembered. I thought for a second, sat up to face her and said, your favorite color is blue. Your dog's name was Maurice. Your mother's name was Betty, and she was a bitch. Your favorite teacher was Mr. French, and he taught music. Your favorite artist was Elia, and your favorite band was Electric Light Orchestra. Your favorite movie was Rush Hour 1. Your favorite position was reverse cowgirl. You have 4 moles, 1 on your ass, 1 on your leg, 1 on your back, and 1 on the back of your neck. You've always wanted to visit Canada. Your favorite animal was the dolphin. You prefer dogs to cats. You're insecure about your height, size of your boobs, and the fact that you put on weight around your waist first. Your favorite type of beer is Coors. Your favorite chocolate is Galaxy. Your best friend was, me, I guess. Oh, and your favorite meal treat was pizza. Your favorite toppings being jalapenos, red onions, and spicy ground beef. Your turn. She sat and stared at me for a moment, smiling, then said, for someone who can't stand saying my name, you sure remember a lot about me. I sat up, took a swig of my beer, pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and said, I used to love you, remember? You can't forget those details so easily. I could keep going if you want me to. She adjusted herself, My last comment seemed to make her uncomfortable. She thought for a second, then began. Your favorite color is red. You never had any pets. Your mom's name was Fiona, and your dad's Stuart. Your brother's name was Marcus, and your sister's name was Lisa. You always wanted to visit Japan. Your favorite teacher was, Miss B or something. She taught world history, and you fancied her for ages. Your favorite food is chicken madras with rice and garlic naan. Your favorite artist was either Tupac or Wu-Tang Clan. Favorite movie was that Top Gun parody with Charlie Sheen in it. So you have a massive scar on your chest from when your big brother pushed you off a garage roof when you were 14. You were in the hospital for 2 months. Your favorite chocolate was dark. I don't think you ever told me the brand. You're insecure about your weight as well because you were fat when you were a teenager. Your favorite beer is some German cloudy stuff, but you prefer spirits. Irish whiskey, I think. That's all I got. I was honestly impressed, although I wouldn't show it. To think she knew so much, and have been capable of doing what she did? Amazing, I thought to myself. Well, I guess she would have had to know me that well to do what she did. I looked over at her, unable to hide my smile. Although that smile was there out of sheer disbelief. She took it as me being impressed and buried her head in her laptop again. See, she muttered. I was about to say what I was thinking, but I thought better of it. Instead, I took a few drags of my cigarette and drank my beer while she sat typing away. So, has any of that changed? She said, looking up while typing. I thought for a second, then said, well, my favorite artist is Tupac, and my favorite beer is Belgian, not German. The movie is called Hot Shots, and it's Cadbury's Bourneville. That's the name of my favorite chocolate. Haven't had any in years. But yeah, otherwise pretty accurate on the stuff you can remember. What about you? Anything change? She sat and thought, then shook her head no. No, I don't think so, but do I really have a mole on my bum? I nodded. Left cheek, just above where the cheek meets the back of your leg. She smiled and rolled her eyes. Perv, she let out, getting back to work on her laptop. I snickered. Please, I know your body inside and out. I could write a manual for you. She smiled and typed away, until the doorbell rang and I bought the pizza. As we sat down and ate, she said, come on then. Tell me all about my body. No, I told her, looking at the TV and picking up a slice. I'm not here to indulge you. The fact is, I know, and that's all there is to it. All right, she said, as she turned to the TV. One thing, and I won't bother you about it again. Something nobody knows except you. I thought for a moment and chose carefully, waiting for her to put a slice of pizza in her mouth. Then I said, when you come hard, you make it sound like a rusty garden gate and you go cockeyed. She gagged on the slice, covering her mouth with her hand, throwing the half-eaten slice back in the box. I grinned and squinted my eyes at her, then took a victory swig of my beer. When she managed to swallow, she uttered, fucker, under her breath. Then she went on to say, I swear on my mom's life, you're the only one who's ever made me do that. While still looking at the TV, I said, if you're trying to boost my ego, don't bother. She waved her hands and said, no, I'm not. It's just a matter-of-fact thing. Well, it's easy to do. I won't bother explaining the mechanics of it to you, but you'd be surprised how much I still remember. Just a matter-of-fact thing. Is that so? Yeah. We polished off the pizza and watched TV until 10 p.m. Noticing that the news was coming on, I said, come on, you should probably go take a shower now. I'll set up your bed stuff. She went into her boxes, then turned around and said, I don't have any more pajamas or clean towels. Hold on, I said while getting up to walk to my room. Then I dumped a fresh pile of jogging bottoms, an old t-shirt, and a towel next to her. Thanks, she said as she made her way past me into the bathroom. I set everything up for her, and when she came out, I went to bed. Not long after I settled, I heard movement. Then the bathroom light shone into my bedroom through the cracks around the door. Then, when she was done, I heard a knock on my door. It's open, I said hazily, my mind firmly in sleep mode from a hard day of work. She shuffled in and took a seat on the bed, asking if we could talk, and telling me it wouldn't take long. All right, I said with my arms over my eyes, quickly though. She sat, fidgeting for a moment, then looking away with her back towards me, she began. I've been thinking all day while filling out that paperwork, and I'm scared about how you might react when I say this. You're not going back on our deal, I said firmly, and you're definitely not going back there. I know, she said quietly. I'm not trying to back on the deal, I promise. Alright, then what's this about? Do you ever think you'll be able to say my name again? I'll admit, it felt like she was pressuring me a little bit, and it made me uneasy, but I tried not to get angry about it. I wanted to go to sleep, and I've never been good at going to sleep pissed off, so I let out a deep breath and gave the only answer that I could think of. I'm only going to say this once. How you take it is your problem. I felt her shuffle, probably nervous about what I was going to say. You did something so horrible to me and my family that I honestly sat awake at night for weeks, wishing I could burst into flames. I lost a lot because of what you did, and what makes me angry the most is that you can't even come up with a good reason for it. That leaves me imagining that you never even loved me, that you did it sheerly out of spite, and the fact that you could. Telling you what I went through is pointless because it's in the past, and I'm over it. It might have taken me back a few years, but what's done is done. Nothing can change it. Now, if you were in my position, and I'd done all that to you, do you think you'd be able to say my name without feeling angry? No. She began to sob, which put me in a spot. I wouldn't be able to get to sleep with her sobbing. Fuck me, I thought, sitting up. Too tired to think about the implications, I put my arm around her and pulled her sideways down onto my chest and shushed her. I was more than aware of how it could be interpreted, but I really just wanted to quiet her down so I could get some sleep. Eventually, her sobbing softened, and I noticed she'd grabbed my arm to cuddle. I was a little annoyed at her taking liberties after all that I'd said, but I decided not to act rashly, which would set her off again. In fact, a little part of me was happy about it. It's exactly how she used to sleep with me. She had to be touching me somehow, whether she'd be wrapping herself around my arm or sleeping on my chest with her fingers touching her mouth. It made me smile briefly, before that feeling was consumed by darker memories. I let out a loud sigh and with a quiet, "For fuck's sake," I settled down and eventually fell asleep. I awoke at around 5:30 and found her sprawled all over me. She had been awake in the night. That much was obvious because I noticed the unzipped sleeping bag was there too. Maybe she got up to take a piss, or maybe she was too cold and went to get it. Either way, it was curious. What was more curious was the way she had her hand up my shirt. She always had a thing for that. I remembered us having a long conversation about the scar tissue on my chest after the first time we had sex. She asked what it was, and I told her scar tissue is almost hypersensitive. Running your finger over it felt weird, like a tingling sensation. When I landed on the floor after the garage accident, it crushed my ribs inwards and fractured them in a few places. One of them broke too and got lodged. I had to have an operation to set them all back in place, thus the scar. It only took me a couple of months to get over that, and although I was excluded from PE and sports for a while, making me chubby, I eventually completely healed, and only the memento of that near brush with my maker was that scar. She always had a thing for touching it. I lay there for a while, watching her sleep, and very slowly peeled the blanket over and lifted the back of the spare t-shirt that was immensely baggy on her. It made me angry to look at it. Her olive skin riddled with deep patches of bruises scattered everywhere, so much so you could hardly see her true skin tone from the angle I was looking from. I pulled the t-shirt down again and gently scratched the top of her head with my fingers, through her hair. The sun was beginning to creep, and I needed to get up for work. When she began to stir, I took her arms and placed them near her chest. Before shifting out from under her and jumping out of bed, I quickly showered, expecting her to be up, but she was still under that light blue sleeping bag quilting. So I sat down on the edge of the bed, took the hair dryer out of the drawer, and turned it on. As I began to blow dry my hair, she turned around to face me, and with no expression, she watched for a moment as I dried my hair. When I turned the dryer off and stood up to open my wardrobe, she sat up. I turned around and said, "Still not a morning person?" She smiled and rubbed her face with her hands as I fished out a shirt and tie. I noticed she was watching me in the mirror next to my bed. As I looked into it, she looked away. "You know, I'd charge you if I wasn't sure you were broke until next week. What happened to sleeping in the living room anyways? Aren't my sofas comfortable enough? She said nothing for a moment. Then, as I was doing my tie, she said, "Sorry, Dan." I looked at her in the mirror and said, "Well, don't make a habit of it or anything. Remember the deal. Now, what are you going to do today?" She scratched her head as she pondered, then said, "Go to the bank, hand in the change forms, post my passport and driver's license changes, call into work and make sure I'm on for tomorrow, take the laundry down to the laundromat down the road?" She stared at me for a moment before nodding, then made her way to the bathroom. I felt a pang of guilt using her to get the laundry done, but it was only down the road, and if she was going to be living with me for the time being, she should help out with chores. I wash my clothes once a week anyway, so she wouldn't have much to carry, and it's better than me taking her stuff. Ex-girlfriend or not, women have a thing with clothes, and they don't like other people touching them. Confident that she had a game plan for the day, I set off for work, and as usual, the working day went pretty damned uneventful. At least it's Friday, I thought while I was standing in the briefing room. The day went fast as I plowed through the pile of paperwork in my desk in a serious attempt to get the drop on next week. By the time 4:30 hit, every document had been seen to, and seeing as I'd skipped lunch, I told my boss I was getting off early. Content with the fact that I had cleared my workload, he waved me out and I made my way down to the car park. In my car, I pulled out my phone and went to call her, but I realized that I had deleted her number. Can't hurt, I thought to myself as I keyed in the number I knew from 7 years ago. I haven't changed my number, so it's possible she hasn't changed hers. I set the phone to go through the car speakers and placed it in the dock as I drove out onto the main road. It took her a while, but she picked up. "Hello? Oh, you still use this number. That's good. Oh, hello, Daniel. Did you get everything done today?" "Yeah, I'm at the laundromat now." "Good. It's Friday, and I usually have pizza on Fridays, so I'm getting pizza. Will you be back in about an hour or two?" "Yeah, but you don't have to buy me anything." I thought it over. "I'm not eating pizza in front of you. That's fucked up. And if you feel bad about it, then we can split halves. Sound good?" "Okay, cool. See you soon." "Bye." So I stopped off at Snappy's Tomato Pizza and got a pizza with her toppings on one half and mine on the other. Next, I went into the off license and got a 4-pack of Coors in a vain attempt to make her stop drinking my beer. I threw the bag in the box in the back seat of the car and set off towards home with some cheesy rock rap. Thinking about it, I'm sure it was Executioners. My door was wide open when I got back to the flat. My mind started spinning as I walked through the hallway. All the doors were wide open, light fittings smashed. My framed, signed album art poster in the hallway on the floor, glass was smashed and the frame was trampled. In the bathroom, the mirror had been cracked, and its shards were all over the sink basin. The shower curtain had been pulled down, and hot water left running in the sink. My living room was completely trashed, with the sofas toppled over, glass on my coffee table shattered all over the floor, and I could see bits of her phone amongst it, as if it had been picked up and bombed down towards the floor, causing it to shatter on impact. Light fitting hung off the ceiling like someone had tried to rip it down. Her moving boxes were also kicked over, and her things were scattered around my room. My TV and hi-fi sound system completely obliterated, with bits of wood, plastic, and glass everywhere. And in the kitchen, my stovetop was cracked and smashed. Appliances littered the floor. I walked into my bedroom, threw the pizza on the bed, rubbed my face, then took my cigarettes out of my pocket and popped one out into my mouth. I dipped my head lightly to catch the lighter's flame. There were footprints on my bed. The wardrobe doors had been booted inwards and my desk lamp had been thrown against the wall. I leaned over into my bedside cabinet, and as I thought, my emergency banknotes had been taken out of my jewelry box, along with my dad's 1953 Psycho he bought in Osaka years before I was born. Gone was my mother's locket, which I planned to repair for my sister's 18th birthday. Nothing was left of the various bits of jewelry I'd accumulated over the years, and neither was the family signet ring I inherited for my 21st birthday. I felt nothing. I was so taken back. I couldn't even bring myself to feel angry. The ash on my cigarette dropped on the floor as I sat thinking. Where is she? I tried to roll out the fat fuck I had warned him, "If you ever came near her again, I'll bury you." But I couldn't think of anyone else. I rubbed my hands with my face again, trying to stop the surge of rage I could feel welling up inside my stomach. I took the cigarette from my mouth and took a long, deep breath, then rose to my feet and threw the cigarette butt into the toilet and flushed it. I walked into my kitchen, opened the cupboard beneath the sink, and took out a dark blue and black Nike bag, a bottle of window cleaner, 2 microfiber rags, and a paint mask. I returned to my bedroom, took out a beanie hat, a black tracksuit, and black gym trainers. After that, I opened the bathroom cabinet, popped open my first aid box, and took out a pair of purple medical sanitized gloves still in the packet. Finally, I phoned the police and told them my place had been ransacked. The officers took less than 10 minutes to arrive. He brought with him a Soko bloke who went around looking for prints, but didn't find any. Surprise, surprise. After giving the officer a statement and a list of things that were taken, they drove off. Then I started rummaging through her things. As I thought, that stupid bastard forgot to take her house keys with him. With those in my pocket, I jumped in my car and made my way back to that shithole. I could only imagine what I'd do when I got there. I made sure to pull up on a different street close by the house. I jumped into the back of the car and put my tracksuit on, then my beanie, then my shades, and left my cargos and work shirt in the rear. I changed my shoes from tennis trainers, and almost as if I was on autopilot, I simply took the bag and exited the car from the back seat, putting her keys in one pocket and my keys in the other. I walked straight into the flat entrance and slowly walked up to the stairs. 3B, I told myself, taking out my gloves and slipping them on, followed by the disposable paint mask. As I stood next to the door, I listened intently. The TV was on. The lights were on, and I kneeled against the letterbox and lifting the flap slowly to hear what was going on inside more clearly. I could hear whimpering. Her whimpering. Then a thump, followed by screaming which made her shriek. I pictured her cowering in the corner, like those domestic abuse adverts on TV. That made up my mind, and I took her keys out of my pocket. Slowly and carefully, I pushed the Yale key into the top barrel lock and turned it quietly until the door unlocked. Then, without making a sound, I took the keys out, folded them into my hands, and put them back into my pocket. 3, 2, 1. And then, letting all the pent-up anger out in one flash, I kicked the door and ran in, letting the door catch on the springs and slam behind me. I ran straight into the living room, and giving him no time to react, I rushed straight for the fat cunt sitting on the sofa. Before he could even say shit, I ran in with my arm cocked and punched him straight in the face with all of my strength. I grabbed him by his collar and pulled him off the sofa and onto the floor, unleashing a barrage of kicks to his body, gritting my teeth and growling like a wild beast with every blow. "You fucking prick! What the fuck did I tell you would happen?" I yelled as I laid the blows into him. He folded his arms over his face and curled up into a ball, and as much as I wanted to, I couldn't stop kicking him. My impulses completely took control, and the rage destroyed my inhibitions. I kicked at his arms until they gave way, and then jumped down on him. I laid into his face before raising my fist up, twatting him on his nose again, which was already freshly bruised from the previous night. I continued, while the blood from his nose pooled in his throat, causing him to gag and cough it up all over the side of his face and up onto mine. The purple surgical gloves I was wearing were stained, and I'm sure, if I could see it, it would have been on my tracksuit too. At this point, he wasn't trying to cry out anymore. He was just taking it, and if she hadn't grabbed my arm to stop me, I would have probably kept going until I killed him. As she grabbed my fist, I looked up at her and growled through the mask. She shrieked and fell over. I kept my eyes locked on her. She had a black eye and her cheek was swollen up badly. Enraged even further, I turned around and punched the fat cunt in the mouth, causing him to cry out and whimper loudly. Looking back at him again, and seeing him sitting on the floor, wide-eyed and trembling at me, then looking at the sad sack of shit on the floor barely moving, I grabbed him by the collar and screamed, "Watch! Money! Locket! Ring! Now!" He pointed over to his jacket, and I picked my things up and stuffed them into my bag. I looked back at her, sitting on the floor watching me. I took out the window cleaner and sprayed them on the clean side of the rag, then used it to wipe the doorknob, the back of the door, and anything else I could remember touching while I was in there. Then I took the nozzle off of the bottle and splashed a drop on his ugly face, fresh with grazes. He screamed out in pain as the chemical seeped into his wounds. I screamed at him, "Wake up! Look at me!" grabbing his collar and commanding his full attention. He groaned. "What did I tell you? What did I tell you last time I was here, mate?" I grabbed his head and slammed it on the floor before picking him back up by his collar again. "Didn't I tell you not to go near her? Didn't I tell you I'd fucking kill you? Huh? Open your fucking ears, mate! Yes!" he cried out. "You break into my flat, you trash my shit, you steal my stuff, and then you take her?" He laid there, looking up at me, blood dripping down his face. "Let's count the charges. Breaking and entering, theft, criminal damage, assault, battery, kidnapping. Do you think you're some sort of gangster, you fat fucking cunt?" He looked up at me, saying nothing. I dropped his collar and stood up, tipping the window cleaner all over his face and clothes, then stood over him with the lighter in my hand. Please," he whimpered, covering his face in his arms. "Give me one good fucking reason," I yelled. My thumb ready to flick the lid open, he began shuffling backwards until his back was against the sofa. Then a soft, whimpering voice from across the room said, "He's not worth it." "He isn't worth it, Dan," she said quietly behind me. "Don't throw your life away over him, please." I turned to her, and then turned to him, then flicked up the lighter with my thumb, ready to spark the flint. His eyes wobbled, and I'm sure he was experiencing one of those life before your eyes moments. I sparked the flame and held it over him, then remarked softly, "I don't have much of a life to begin with, mate. Seriously, if I drop this on you now, all it would mean to me is free meals and a nice soft bed for 6 or 10 years. I hear they even give you TVs and PlayStations in your cells now, too, for good behavior. 6 to 10 years of no bills, no stress, and a very long time to laugh about how I barbecued a fat fucking pig." Well, that's if they could catch me anyways. I don't know if you've noticed, but the gear I'm wearing is a fairly safe forensic precaution. "I'll never go near you again," he said. He pleaded. "I promise I won't." "Do you think your words mean anything?" I screamed, causing him to jolt and clamber further back. "I don't know you, man. 10 years in prison sounds pretty fucking good to me." I closed the lighter into my fist and used my other hand to grab his collar. "I know you won't go near her again, and I know you're not stupid enough to call the police either. Not when your fat fucking DNA is all over my flat. You're gonna stay away, because if I see you again, I won't burn you alive. I'll fucking torture you. If I so much as see you walking down the street, I'll be back here and we can do this all over again." I kicked him in the stomach as I stood up, then picked up my bag and collected up the rag and window cleaner. Before zipping everything up and putting it on my back, I walked over to his TV stand and booted the leg, causing the TV to topple over and smash on the floor. I would have done more, but nothing else in the room looked as if it had any value. I looked towards her and said, "If you need anything, well, now the time's to get it. Because if I have to come back here one more time, he's leaving in black bags." She shook her head and stood up. "I need you to open the doors for me." "I can't." And she held up my hands. "Go down the stairs and wait. I'll be down in a sec, okay?" She stared blankly at my eyes. "Don't give me that look. I'm done here. I just want to make sure he doesn't get any ideas." She slowly walked backwards, then out of the room, and out of the door to the flat. I stood, staring at him for a while, and then said, "Who told you where I lived? And don't try my patience," I yelled as I held up the lighter. "Betty told me your name, and then I looked," he said, barely able to keep his head up as he sat there slumped down over himself. "Call her, or anyone who knows her again, and I will be back. Got that?" He remained motionless, just staring at me, barely able to keep his head up. "If I ever have to come back here again, I'm going to decapitate you. No, that's the least painful thing I can think of. I will burn out your eyes and cut out your tongue. I'll sew it up to your mouth along with your fingers, and then I'll pour kerosene down your nose and light you up like a fucking jack-o'-lantern, you disgusting fucking pig." I turned and walked towards the door, banging the light switch with my arm, causing the room to go dark as I made my way out. As I walked down the steps, I removed the gloves and folded them into one another, inside out, tying them up at the end. Then I threw them into the bag along with the paint mask. As I reached the bottom, I saw her standing very still. Neither of us said a word as we approached the car. Before getting in, I took off my tracksuit jacket and trainers and threw them into the bag. Reaching in, I took out my money, ring, locket, and watch and put them in the center console, along with 60 quid I found in his wallet, before stuffing the coat back in, followed by my t-shirt, beanie, and bottoms. Then I put my work shirt back on, and followed by my cargos and shoes, and I stepped out the back into the driver's seat. She still refused to say a word. When I started the car, she said, "Please take those off." "What?" I said, looking towards her while taking out a cigarette. "Those fucking sunglasses." She broke down crying. I took them off to examine them, and there were blotches of blood all over. I looked in the mirror. There was blood on my cheeks. I was drenched in sweat. I could feel the cold wind through my car window as the adrenaline slowly dissipated and my heart rate came down. Her crying was loud and mournful. I touched her and she flinched at me with fear in her eyes. I turned around in the road and pulled away, driving the long way back through the middle of the city. She probably thinks I'm a monster, I thought, my cheek resting against the palm of my hand as I drove lazily down the pretty vacant residential streets towards the commercial and central business districts. I peered out over at her, and she was staring out the window, not moving an inch, as if her body was in suspended animation. Even as the car swayed as I took corners, she was stiff as a plank and as silent as a mouse. Eventually, I reached my destination and pulled up along a roadside canal. She turned to me, curiously, as I stepped out of the car and into the back. Making sure nobody was around to see, I threw the bag as hard as I could, sending it flying into the night sky, and with a plunk, the evidence would never be recovered. The filthy water and the enzymes within would wash away and eat at anything incriminating long before anyone would find it. It's a pretty fucking deep canal after all, and jumping back into the car, and one wet wipe later, there was no trace of what I'd done that night. All that was left was the memories of those involved. It's possible that some CCTV cameras caught sight, though I wasn't worried that he'd squeal. His crimes made me look like a choir boy in comparison. As we continued home, she started sniffling. I imagined she was going through a mental replay of the last 4 or 5 hours, and honestly, I felt bad about what she'd been through, but worse for seeing me that way. Anyone who knows me knows I'm not quick to violence. Despite my sweet and sour working-class upbringing, that was the very first time I had been able to put a cap on my anger. I imagine that we all have a valve to turn on your dark side, letting out just enough, always staying in control of your actions and keeping that inner demon under lock and key. But tonight, more than anything else, it scared me that I had lost complete control of that valve, able to give myself over to that demon and act completely on impulse without inhibition or restraint. I'm positive, no, absolutely sure, that she had not been there to stop me, I would have killed him. I probably could have kept wildly slamming my fist into that person's face until he passed out and suffocated in his own blood, and even then I probably wouldn't have stopped until every last ounce of evil, pent-up aggression and rage was spent, and he was long dead. It was chilling knowing that there was a limit, and that I'd reached it. We got out of the car and slowly made our way up to Home Sweet Home. We both stopped at the door threshold and looked in as I turned the lights on. I turned to her and said, "It's alright if you want to sleep. We can change the sheets on my bed first and you can get to bed while—" "No, it's okay. I'll help." With the police report on my desk and the pictures on my phone from when the officers walked around with me, it was alright for the place to be cleaned up. The officer informed me that as long as I was able to produce the pictures, save most of the wreckage, and give the insurers the police report, I would be able to receive a payout. I went into the cupboard and got out the dustpan and brush, the vacuum, and some boxes to put the shards into. We set about cleaning up the living room first. Neither of us was very energetic about it. When the floor was cleared, I tipped the sofas back and pushed them into the middle of the room. We pushed the demolished coffee table towards the back. The dim wall plug timer lamp was the only thing he spared in the living room. I used to use it whenever I was stopping out late to give wannabe criminals the impression that someone was home, and turn itself on around 3 a.m., when I was usually home, passed out in my bed. Even so, it created a calming atmosphere in the otherwise fucked up living room. I disconnected the TV and placed it into the boxes of wreckage at the back of the room, along with every other smashed object. Well, That's one room down, I told myself. I looked at her and she still had the same expression as before, neither denying nor confirming what was going on. I made my way to sort out the bathroom. Other than the already redundant shower curtain and the mirror shards, it was relatively unscathed. When she came in and looked into the shattered mirror, she recoiled a bit and told me, "You still have blood on your face." I tried to rub it off, but none of it came off. Unsettled, I looked away. "Hey, this is the worst of it. Let's take a break," I told her. We returned to the living room, as I sat down, taking the ashtray off the floor and putting it on the arm of the chair. She sat next to me and hesitated before leaning on me. "This is all going to cost thousands to replace." Clutching her hands together, a tear slowly rolled down her cheek before she mumbled, "I'm sorry," and brought her head down to meet her hands. I rubbed her back gently with my hand and shushed her. She turned into me and put her head onto my chest. "Nah, it's just a 300 quid excess fee. Not bad, all things considered. A couple of years back, I found that More Than Home Insurance advert entertaining enough to look into it online. I guess TV ads really do work on stupid people." I could have sworn I heard her giggle, and that brought me a little comfort. She stayed like that for a while, as I rubbed her back. Eventually, the sounds of her crying and sniffling dampened, and I had a moment to think. "Listen, people can live out their entire lives and never see someone lose it the way I did. But I don't want you to think that I'm that kind of guy." There was a brief silence, and still, with her head on my chest, she quietly said, "You're the same person you were 7 years ago, Daniel. The gentle giant type. Remember when in school that bunch of year 9s was picking on that year 7 lad and you marched over to them? That was when I very first noticed you in school. You stuck out because of your height, but you stuck out to me because you were kind. That part of you is never going to change." "You're probably right, but you don't see me doing charity work or helping old ladies across the street, and I drink and smoke like a sailor." She looked up at me and stared into my eyes for a moment, before putting her head back down and saying, "It doesn't matter. You are who you are." I lost myself in thought about what she said, and before I knew it, she was sound asleep on my lap. I gently got myself out from under her and went into my bedroom for something to throw over her. The only thing I could find was this big brown winter warmer thing. The sleeping bag had been trampled on, so I folded it up and put it by the side of my bed. Then started changing the bed sheets, pillowcases, and duvet covers. I had to smile. The only spare set I have are these bright orange and green retro-looking ones from my '70s show. Loving sister bought me them for Christmas. It made my bed look like a giant tic-tac. I quietly brushed up the glass from the hallway and tipped it into the bag along with the smashed light bulbs in the bathroom mirror. The bigger shards stuck out of the bottom as I picked it up, and a few little shards fell out as I quietly walked into the living room. In the kitchen, everything was fucked. Even the microwave, which made me angry, seeing as I had a stone-cold pizza in my bedroom and no way to cook it. Not even the kettle worked, so I couldn't even make a cup of tea. But luckily, the demented cunt had left my fridge alone, save for a few dents in the door. I took out 2 beers and walked into the living room. In there, I amped up the heating a little in a vain attempt to warm up the pizza as well. Maybe it was to make the beer taste better, like how it does ice cold on a hot summer's day. I gently rubbed her arm as I sat down and opened up my laptop. Luckily, my modem and router were tucked away behind the TV, so everything was working. As she woke up, I pushed the pizza box towards her along with the beer and said, "It's kinda cold, and I know you're not hungry, but if you don't eat, you won't be able to sleep well. Just a few slices and you'll be alright." She nodded and began munching on a slice, beer in hand, and I loaded up an episode of Sherlock on BBC iPlayer. We sat quietly while we ate, drank, and watched the massive plot hole that was the latest episode. Halfway through, I noticed I plowed through my half of the pizza and had already started on hers. She didn't seem to care at all, even though we'd planned on going halves on it. I'd have asked for the money, but I was pretty sure she was feeling bad enough about everything she owed me, directly or indirectly. By the end of the episode, I had a cigarette in my hand and half a beer left. The adrenaline completely left my system, and my stomach was so full, I pushed the laptop on top of the empty pizza box and stood up. "I'm going to take a shower," I said as I looked over at her. "You all right for clothes after I'm out?" She nodded silently while loading up something on the laptop. I'll be okay. My PJs are clean, she said hazily. Content with that, I collected up a towel and a set of boxers and went in. When I came out, she went in straight after, almost mechanically. I went into my bedroom to blow dry my hair, and when she came out, she sat down and did the same. I pushed the sofas together in the living room and left my laptop on with an internet radio station on quietly. Then I turned the screen off so it wouldn't hamper her efforts to get some sleep. I threw some pillows onto the sofa and turned the timer lamp on. Knowing it was all set for her, I turned off the lights and went back into my room where she was just finishing up with the blow dryer. "You're all set in there," I said, rubbing my face and picking up my cigarette from the bedside table. I took my phone out of my cargo's pocket and put it on charge, then put the radio on quiet in a small attempt to block out my thoughts when I went to bed. Then I went out to the balcony, regretting that I forgot to put on some shorts and a t-shirt. As the cold wind whistled around me, I thought about all the crazy shit that I'd done that day and smiled to myself, shaking my head as I blew out smoke. It was pointless to think about it all. What is done, I said to myself out loud, and I leaned down and rested my head on my arms, letting out a huge yawn and flicking the cigarette butt onto the concrete below as I headed back inside. I spread out on my bed. I had never been much of a jazz guy, but whatever the TuneIn app had selected on my phone felt appropriate. Easy listening, smooth jazz. I lay there with my eyes shut, following the gentle beat and rhythm of the saxophone with my mind, trying to keep my mind off of everything that had happened. After quite a while, maybe 10 minutes or so, I could feel myself drifting. Then I heard shuffling from the living room, then the familiar shuffle of one small blonde girl shuffling around. I saw the bathroom light go on, and a few moments later, off again. Then I heard a whisper through my door. "Daniel?" she said quietly. "Are you awake?" I remained silent, hoping that she would shuffle away back into the living room, and eventually she did. But my relief was short-lived though, as the shuffling soon made its way back towards my door, this time gently turning the handle of my door and popping it open. I kept my eyes shut, hoping that she would use her better judgment and avoid disturbing me, but no such luck. The shuffle came ever closer towards my bed, and then stopped. Then I felt the mattress sink as she took her place next to me. I can't tell if she's scared to sleep alone after today or just hates sleeping on those sofas. I felt that winter warmer flop over my side. Can't decide whether I should eject her either. She did have a rough day. My thoughts were halted as a hand as cold as a can of beer touched my abs and my muscles contracted to counter the sensation. "Are you awake, Dan?" I heard her whisper softly. "Fucking well am now." And I sighed. "Too cold in the living room?" I said as I put my hands over my face, running them through my hair and then spreading them out over the bed. "No." "Then why are you here?" I felt her tense up as I asked the question, curling up next to me. There was a small pause. Then she shyly said, "I don't want to be by myself." I thought as much. Well, you should probably get inside the sheets if that's the case. The hand she put across my abs moved up to my chest as she shuffled upwards to the bed, her hair touching my arm as she resettled. "Can I stay here?" "Are you scared of being in the living room?" "Yes." "Get inside the sheets then." "Will you?" "Nah, I never sleep inside the sheets. You know that." "Can I stay here?" I wasn't in the mood to protest, so I folded my arm around her and told her, "Don't make a habit out of it." She took my arm and did the hug pillow thing, folding her arms and curling her legs around it. It wasn't uncomfortable, but even if it was, I was way too tired to care. Beating people up and having adrenaline running tires out every inch of the body, no matter what shape you're in. But just for fun, I tugged my arm and jokingly made an "arg" sound. She uttered the sound a child makes when you try to take something away from them, and hugged my arm tighter. I smiled. Then I curved my hand around and used my fingers to tickle her stomach. She squirmed and made that sound again. Then I grabbed the hem of her PJ bottoms and slid my hand inside, slowly waiting for her to react. As I began to tickle, she shook her hand, fished mine out of her bottoms, and held it with our hands clasped. "Perv," she said in a sleepy tone before readjusting and settling down again. Amused, I took a deep breath and let out a loud yawn, and within a few moments, I fell asleep. I woke up around 5 and noticed she had shifted around in the bed a little. Her awkward sleeping position had strangled the arm she was clinging onto, causing me to lose feeling in it, so much so I could barely move it at all. How nostalgic, I thought as I remembered the scene from Kill Bill. Wiggle your big toe. I smile as I struggle to move my fingers and get the blood pumping around my arm again. With a little patience, the feeling comes back and the pins and needles were unreal. So, I slowly slid my arm out of her death grip, gentle and slow, trying not to wake her, and once it was out, I picked myself up off the bed. Did it have to be my smoking arm? I thought to myself. My arm still pretty much useless after the hours of near suffocation she had put it through. I grabbed my cigarettes, popped one into my mouth, then grabbed my lighter and walked out the room and into the living room to my still playing laptop. I sat down on the colder than cold leather sofa, which sent a shiver up my spine as I reclined into it. Saturday, I thought to myself as I was loading up the BBC News. Today, I'd usually masturbate, take a shower, do my skincare thing, and spend the rest of the day at the reservoir jogging and loafing. Reading the news about the economy is one of those necessary evils you have to do as you get older. You know you can't do shit about it, but you've got to know about it. Plus, it gives you something to talk about at work. Now, normally, I'd just put the TV on and switch over to BBC News 24, but looking across the room at that fucked up TV, that wasn't really an option. After reading, I loaded up Kerrang on low volume and went to the coffee maker. I quickly realized that it was on the casualty list, so I opted for some orange juice instead and left the glass on the counter before sneaking back into my room and picking out a pair of green cargos and a black sleeveless hoodie to counter the coldness of the sofa. Picking up the juice, I went back into the living room, lit the cigarette, and instead of questing for porn as I normally would, I just sat back and enjoyed the tunes and fumes. After that was done, I took the peace and quiet as an opportunity to fill out the claim form online. As my iPod was unscathed in the attack, I connected it to my laptop and enjoyed. Before long, a small figure came walking in, rubbing her eyes. "Good morning, Daniel." "What's that?" she said as she plopped down on the sofa next to me. "Claims form," I said as she took the arm she had been suffocating all night and wrapped it around her shoulders. "Best to get this sorted as soon as possible. I only have 48 hours to make the claim." She said nothing for a while and just watched as I filled in the list of things that were taken and broken. Even if the ring, locket, watch, and money were back in my possession, it had to be consistent with the police report. She watched as I filled in a spreadsheet of every item involved, then looked up at me as I saved the file and looked down at her. "Oh, Daniel," she said sleepily, breaking out a yawn. "You have to be the only person I know who wouldn't be freaking out about something like this. If this was my place, I'd have had a nervous breakdown when I walked in." "Yeah, well, my dad always told me to take life how it comes, rather than worrying about the little things." She gestured her head at the pile of broken items piled up at the back of the room. "Everything over there is just little things?" "They're just things. The big things in life, death, love, prosperity, family, and all that stuff has no real cash value. Thanks for not getting mad about this." "Why would I be mad? I'm looking at the bright side. Might even be able to afford a few extra things with policy money." I sighed. "The only thing I'm pissed about is my coffee table. I fucking love that thing, and I'm sure they don't make them anymore." She smiled, and waiting for a moment, sat up and said, "Close your eyes for me." "Why?" "Come on, just do it, please." I closed my eyes, expecting her to go and get something. Instead, she shifted her leg around to sit on my lap, facing me, and covering my eyes with her hands, she leaned down and kissed me, keeping it for as long as possible and putting her arms around my shoulders. I leaned back on the sofa as a rush of good feelings washed over me and put my arms around her hips to hold her close. After a moment, she broke the kiss. "I've been wanting to do that since you first let me in here. You're not mad, are you?" I thought for a second, staring into her eyes, then smiled and said, "I don't know. Hard to make that kind of decision with just one kiss." She fluttered her eyes and smiled as I took her head and laid her down to my side of the couch, pressing my lips against hers, her arms wrapped around my neck, and her legs around my waist as we lay there. Moments later, she looked up at me smiling and said, "What now?" I smiled and picked her up, looking down at her in my arms, her smiling back and biting her lip. The bedroom was still fairly dark as I placed her on the bed and took my hoodie off. She unbuttoned her classy pajamas as I reached into my bedside cabinet to put something on the end of it. Then I peeled the sheets back, picked her up again, and put her down as I folded the sheets over us. Through mutual cooperation and some heavy petting, my cargoes, her PJ bottoms, and our underwear were thrown out of the bed as we got low. We were at it for 3 hours straight. 7 years without a woman and a week without a wank gives you more than an average sexual appetite. On the last fold, we were both drenched in sweat, her brow glistening in the early light as she rode hard on top of me, her muffled moans and gasps getting more intense as her eyes shut tight. I grabbed her hips and thrust into her hard on the last stretch. Keeping rhythm with her, I rose my abs up and she shook hard, clenching her teeth before letting out one last loud gasp as I shot my load inside her. Then she flopped down onto my chest, using her arms to break her fall, brought her hands into mine and clasped them gently, panting on top of me as I tried to control my breathing. I brushed her hair out of my face and back towards her body, and brought my arms around to embrace her, holding her close on top of me. There we lay for a while, enjoying the moment as our breathing steadied. I looked down, and she was fast asleep on top of me, her hands around my sides. Amazing, I thought to myself. 7 years later, and she can still take it out of me. My mind wandered, and I found myself questioning what our current relationship was, or what she would think if I told her that. You can't wave a pussy in front of me and expect 7 years of pain and struggle to be forgotten. Plus, she owed me for all the trouble I'd put myself over the past couple days. Though, maybe owe is a bad word for it, I thought to myself, closing my eyes and running my hands down her back. But then again, I didn't do what I did for that either. I did it because it was the right thing to do, and because he trashed my house. I lifted up the sheet and examined her body again like I did a few nights before. All those cuts, grazes, and bruises all over her body, fresh ones from the previous days, were there too. When she was on top of me, I noticed a fresh black bruise on her stomach. Thinking about it now, he must have hit her pretty hard, more than enough to knock the wind out of her. I gritted my teeth at the thought and held her close to me. I'm glad I did what I did, and I mean every word I said. I'd have killed him if she wasn't there to stop me. Nobody should have to go through that. I thought about other things too, like how she could go from the girl who managed to make a complete fool out of me all those years ago to being stuck in a flat with a deadbeat like that. For a moment, I felt sick. How insulting, I thought to myself, thinking about how she could go from me to him. I mean, come on, she could have at least traded up. Then I remembered that life seldom goes the way you wanted to, and to have taken that road she must have been pretty desperate. She had to have lost everything because what she took from my place was almost nothing. And look at her loser mother. Look at the way she was raised. She was always pretty cutthroat, and I admired that strength, even if I despised it. Though 7 years later, I finally could see what she really had. It wasn't strength at all. It was desperation. She was always hell-bent on obtaining things, working every God-sent hour, being very careful with her money, saving up to buy expensive clothes and dressing formally all of the time. Yep, that's the trademark of a person who has nothing. The only poor person clothes she had were my old t-shirts, and no one could ever get her to wear a beanie or a baseball cap. My little sister used to call her the ghetto snob. It was about right. She couldn't embrace who she was then, always fighting with the way she was brought up. If you heard her mother speak, you wouldn't believe she came from her at all. They were worlds apart, and her mother hated my guts because she saw me as a threat to her daughter's otherwise complete loyalty to her. In the end, her mother won out. Her loyalty to me was the first to go. Then, her respect. You never see those changes when you're in love with someone. You want to believe that they love you just as much as you love them. And I never saw it coming. The day I came home from work, with all of her objectives met, my boxes in front of the door as she coldly demanded I take them and get out. Just remembering that feeling made me extremely angry, almost enough to push her off of me. I can never forget the hell I had to go through to get back on my feet after she had taken everything, drained my accounts and fooled my parents into giving her the money for a car, promising to pay them back $100 a month. But most of all, it wasn't the money she took, so much as the trust she broke, along with my self-esteem and my plans for the future, which all revolved around her. Worst of all, she destroyed my ability to love, and possibly my innocent, youthful view of the world. 7 years later, 7 years wiser, and 7 years of change, while I worked hard to make a good life for myself, get a decent place, and start working towards a better future, constantly investing into myself in every aspect I could, she had walked the path of greed, lies, and self destruction, and for some reason, forced or otherwise, our paths had crossed again. What'll you do now? I thought to myself, as I gently rolled her off of me and pulled the sheets over her, peeling the condom off of my dick and throwing it into the wicker bin. I briefly entertained the thought of throwing her out. But smiling, I shook my head, walking around the bed. Nah, you're not that type of man. Anyway, she's still responsible for fixing what she destroyed. I walked into the bathroom and started the shower, jumping in as the water got warm enough and going straight for the Dove body cleanser. I decided to make it a quick one, just to wash the sweat and sex juice off of me. As I stood with my palms against the tiles, I caught myself thinking about her, wondering if I could ever give her a second chance. My mind scoured its archives, looking for any instance I'd encountered where someone redeemed themselves after fucking up so badly. I decided, as a show of good faith, and not to show I'm placing a little bit of faith in her, instead of calling her by name, a name that made me cringe at the near thought of it, I'd give her a new one. Yeah, it was silly and childish, but hey, if it worked, it might encourage her, and it's not like I had anything to lose. I thought of calling her Akon, but I laughed the idea off. That would stick out way too much, and she might catch on if she thought about it too much. While I was deep in thought, the shower curtain suddenly opened. There stood the little naked blonde, looking a little groggy with her disheveled after-sex hair. You know, you're supposed to stop in bed after sex. It's the rules, Daniel. I stood, staring at her, taking my hands off the wall, as I'm sure it looks weird to anyone watching. I turned to face her and flickered some water at her. Oi, she said, rubbing arms with her hands. Cold. I stood silent for a moment, before offering my hand and saying, Come on, the water's warm. After all that happened, I don't think I really have to stop you from seeing me naked anymore. She hesitated, before taking my hand and carefully stepping in behind me. I took the shower head off the holder and handed her the body wash before reaching around her and rinsing her head to toe. She lathered up, and as I washed the remainder of the suds off of me and handed her the shower head, she grabbed my arm and whimpered, Please stay. Alright, but if I get hard, we're ignoring it. My water bill will go through the roof if this carries on. She smiled as she took the shampoo and worked it through her hair, turning to me and gesturing for me to help her rinse with a smile on her face. Should we talk about it? She said, facing away as I rinsed her hair. About what? The reason we're both standing here? If you want to. I've actually been giving it some thought. So what do you think we should do now? She said, turning to face me as I handed the shower head back. Well, I think it would be a massive mistake to put a label on anything right now. Maybe just take it as it comes. There's still a lot that needs to be worked out before we can even think about that kind of thing. Britt, I said, lightly tapping the tip of her nose with my finger. Britt? Yeah, Britt. What do you think? What do you mean? Remember when we were out on the balcony, you asked if I'd ever call you by your name? Well, how does a fresh new one sound? At least it's a massive step up from using things like hey or you, and I thought it might put you at ease. I still don't like saying your given name, but okay, Britt. She smiled and nodded. I can live with that. I mean it as just for something I'd call you, you know, like a nickname. She smiled and put her arms around my waist. Britt, I heard her speak softly. Thanks, Daniel, for everything. I promise I won't let you down. She looked up into my eyes and said, If it takes me years, I'll show you I'm not the same person I was back then. With a little luck, I'll be able to get you to open up to me one day. And with that, she squeezed my waist with her arms, and after a brief moment of silence, we went into the bathroom, dried off, and had some breakfast, and set off to check out the reservoir, like the good old days. And that's pretty much the cool story of how one Tuesday night, a blonde girl rushed into my apartment, and Britt returned into my life. I still don't know if letting her back in was such a good idea. Only time will tell. But hey, maybe a few months down the line, we can do this again, and I'll call it Cool Story 2. On the Lam, Murder Suspect at Large. Although I'd probably be sleeping at high school sports closets all day and eating snappy tomato pizza while posting what happened at night. Cool story, bro. Epilogue. Last week, I convinced Britt to come with me to her mother's house. There, I told her exactly what was going on, then showed her the bruises all over Britt's body, and called Betty a huge cunt for leaking Britt's location to the fat cunt. She showed no remorse and retorted it was her own damn fault. I flipped out and took Britt home. Britt also went with me to my parents' house on Tuesday, and I acted in her defense as she nervously pleaded her case to my mother, brother, father, and sister. She handed a small part of the money she owed back to my father and promised to pay them back. My parents have respected my wishes and given her another chance, but my little sister made her cry when I was talking to my parents alone, chewing her out for all the shit I went through, and scolded her with words that I probably never could have brought myself to say to her. Britt felt so bad that she had an emotional outburst and then cried herself to sleep that night. Britt's told her friends what happened, but she hasn't told them she's living with me. Instead, she told them that she's staying with an old friend, warning them to stay away from her ex. I trust nothing will come of it. I mean, I left her ex trembling in a pool of his own blood the last time he saw me, so I'm pretty sure he won't want anything to do with her or her friends. If he's got any brains at all, he wouldn't test my patience though, seeing as how last time I could and would have beaten him to death and or roasted him alive. I wish you guys could take away some kind of deeper meaning or moral, but I honestly can't think of any. This was all just some slice of life craziness. I thought you guys would enjoy reading as much as I enjoyed living it. Still, if there's one thing you can take away from it all, it's that showers are actually quite magical. 1, they clean you up. 2, they wash off evidence of ass-kickery and badassery and pizza sauce. 3, they give you a much-needed place and time to think about important things in life. And 4, they're actually kind of romantic and a bit of a teamwork builder if you share one. I hope you guys found this to be a cool story, because I don't know about you guys, but all this reading has made me really sticky. I'm going to grab a nice, hot shower. I hope every time you take a shower, smoke a cigarette, eat a pizza, or kick the shit out of a fat deadbeat, you'll think of me. It's been real awesome, so thanks for reading. Until next time, this has been Cool Story Bro, the Shower Man. Hey guys, it's me, Delverbra. I hope you all enjoyed this story. It's currently 4:23 in the morning as I'm finishing up editing this, but nonetheless, I hope you guys enjoy it, and I hope you guys enjoy the improved audio quality. It might not be noticeable right off the bat, but compared to any of my other videos, old or current, you can definitely tell that there's a very significant increase in audio quality, and that is thanks to a good friend of mine from my Discord named Harry. He sat up with me for multiple hours and worked through all my software and shit, and figured out the optimal audio settings for everything to sound a whole lot nicer, so I'm pretty happy with that. But there were a lot of technical, editing, and recording issues when it came to this, which is why I'm up so late in the fucking morning recording this for you guys. However, I did get both of the videos I promised to do out today, which was a Cool Story Bro, which is this one right here, and Story Bro Part 4 on Patreon. If you are a patron, go ahead and check that one out. And if you're not a patron, fucking support me on Patreon if you feel like it. If you don't, then just fucking watch the shit I have on my channel. Yeah, as for this story, I thought it was pretty cool. The only thing that kind of struck me as a little bit, kind of fake fantasy fulfillment was the super well thought out forensic prevention kit he used to beat the shit out of the guy. But other than that, I thought this was a good read. Very interesting, one I've been wanting to do for a very long time, but it was saving for just the right moment, and I think I did it a pretty good amount of justice in this. However, I'm not British, even though OP is, but I think it still sounded pretty well, or pretty good overall. Anyway, guys, I'm absolutely fucking beat. I'm exhausted. I can't even talk right. I'm slurring all my shit together. I hope you guys enjoyed, and be sure to leave a like if you did. Share it with your friends, whatever have you. And thanks for watching, as always, guys. Thanks for 27,000 or 26,500 subscribers, something like that. Yeah, thanks for everything, guys. My name is Delverbra, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.